What happens when gospel royalty meets one of the most powerful voices in the world? A performance so unforgettable, it sends chills down your spine and leaves millions speechless. Kirk Franklin and Jennifer Hudson didn't just sing Silver and Gold, they turned it into a once-in-a-lifetime spiritual experience that has fans calling it the duet of the decade. But what really happened behind the scenes? And why is this collaboration sparking so much conversation? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will completely change the way you see this iconic moment. Imagine the energy in the room when two music powerhouses, Kirk Franklin, the revolutionary force in contemporary gospel, and Jennifer Hudson, the Oscar-winning singer whose voice can bring audiences to tears, stood side by side to perform the timeless gospel classic, Silver and Gold. Fans expected something beautiful, but what unfolded was far more than just a performance. It was a cultural moment that sent shockwaves across social media, sparked heated debates among gospel traditionalists and music critics, and reminded the world why gospel music still holds the power to move hearts. In this video, we are going to dive deep into everything surrounding this unforgettable duet. From the history of the song itself and Kirk Franklin's groundbreaking role in transforming gospel into mainstream culture, to Jennifer Hudson's journey from Chicago church choirs to international stardom. And here's where it gets interesting. There are hidden layers to this performance that most people never realized. The reactions weren't just praise and applause. There were controversies, insider opinions, and behind-the-scenes details that paint a very different picture of what really happened that night. You won't believe the unexpected response this collaboration received from some corners of the gospel community, or the industry whispers that followed in its aftermath. By the end of this breakdown, you'll understand why this wasn't just a duet. It was a statement, a clash of tradition and innovation, and maybe even the start of something bigger in the world of music. So make sure you stay tuned, because what we're about to uncover will leave you looking at Silver and Gold in a whole new way. Before we can truly understand why this performance became such a lightning bolt moment in music, we need to take a closer look at the two artists who brought it to life. Kirk Franklin is not just a gospel artist. He is a trailblazer who changed the entire landscape of gospel music. Back in the 1990s, gospel was seen by many as music confined to Sunday services and church choirs. Franklin broke that mold completely with hits like Stomp, Revolution, and Imagine Me. He blended gospel with hip-hop, R&B, and contemporary pop, creating a sound that could live both inside the church walls and on mainstream radio. He became a Grammy-winning pioneer who pushed gospel into the cultural spotlight, proving that faith-driven music could be innovative, modern, and relevant. But Kirk Franklin's story is deeper than just music. He grew up in a difficult environment, abandoned by his mother and raised by his aunt. Struggles with identity, poverty, and faith shaped him into someone who sings not just from talent, but from raw experience. Every note, every lyric he delivers comes from a place of survival and redemption. That's why audiences don't just hear Kirk Franklin, they feel him. On the other side of this duet stands Jennifer Hudson, a powerhouse whose voice has been compared to legends like Aretha Franklin and Whitney Houston. But Hudson's journey hasn't been without heartbreak. From her humble beginnings singing in church choirs in Chicago, to her breakthrough on American Idol, to winning an Academy Award for Dreamgirls, her career has been marked by triumph. Yet behind her success lies tragedy. The devastating loss of her mother, brother, and nephew in 2008 nearly silenced her voice forever. But Jennifer rose from those ashes with resilience, channeling her pain into performances that are as emotional as they are technically flawless. Now imagine these two forces of resilience, faith, and raw talent coming together to sing one of the most iconic gospel songs of all time, Silver and Gold. It wasn't just a performance, it was destiny colliding. Franklin, the innovator who brought gospel to the masses, and Hudson, the survivor whose voice can pierce straight into the soul. Their duet was more than a collaboration. It was the merging of two testimonies, two legacies, and two powerful stories told through music. But here's the shocking part. While audiences were moved to tears, not everyone embraced this collaboration. In fact, some critics argued that blending Franklin's high-energy, modern gospel style with Hudson's powerhouse ballad delivery clashed in ways that few expected. And behind the scenes, there were whispers about why these two chose to team up in the first place, and whether there was more to the story than just a love for gospel music. Stay with me because in the next section, we're diving into the history and meaning of Silver and Gold and why this particular song carries such emotional weight that it stirred up passionate reactions when Franklin and Hudson performed it together. To understand why Kirk Franklin and Jennifer Hudson's performance of Silver and Gold struck such a chord, we need to step back and explore the heart of the song itself. Silver and Gold is not just another gospel tune, it's a spiritual declaration, a powerful anthem about choosing faith and eternal treasures over material wealth. At its core, the song reflects one of the oldest teachings of Christianity, that money, fame, and possessions are fleeting, but a connection with God is priceless. Originally released on Kirk Franklin's debut album with the Family in 1993, Silver and Gold instantly stood out as a deeply soulful ballad. While the album featured upbeat tracks that introduced Franklin's groundbreaking fusion of gospel with hip-hop and R&B, this particular song slowed everything down. It was heartfelt, stripped back, and rich with choir harmonies that emphasized the message. I'd rather have Jesus than silver and gold. The song became a staple in gospel communities, often sung during altar calls, revival services, and moments of reflection. Many fans have shared stories of how the lyrics carried them through hardships, poverty, and personal struggles. For countless believers, Silver and Gold isn't just a song. It's a reminder of values, of faith over fortune, and of spiritual wealth over earthly success. Now, bring Jennifer Hudson into the picture. Hudson has spoken openly about her faith, about how church music shaped her artistry from the very beginning. Growing up on Chicago's South Side, gospel wasn't just a genre for her, it was a way of life. For someone who lost so much and yet found the strength to rebuild her life, the message of Silver and Gold resonates on a deeply personal level. When she sings the words, "I'd rather have Jesus," she's not just performing, she's testifying. This is what made the duet so powerful. Franklin, the songwriter and innovator who introduced the world to this masterpiece, standing alongside Hudson, a woman whose life embodies the song's message of endurance and faith. Together, they didn't just revisit a classic, they redefined it for a new generation. But here's where things get complicated. Some gospel traditionalists argued that the duet leaned too heavily into performance theatrics rather than worship. They claimed that Franklin's dynamic presence and Hudson's powerhouse delivery turned the song into a show instead of a sacred offering. Others felt the opposite, that this very collaboration breathed new life into a classic and exposed younger audiences, especially those outside the church, to gospel in a way that felt raw, modern, and relevant. On social media, fans debated endlessly. Was this duet an evolution of gospel, proving that the message could transcend styles and voices? Or was it a departure from the humble, meditative spirit that Silver and Gold originally carried? The clash of opinions only added to the buzz, fueling curiosity about the deeper dynamics at play. And here's the twist most people don't know. Silver and Gold wasn't just randomly chosen for this collaboration. There are whispers that Franklin himself insisted on revisiting it because of how much it personally means to him. Having grown up with very little, Franklin often says that the lyrics mirror his own life journey, that despite fame, awards, and material success, he still values his faith above everything else. Pairing with Hudson wasn't just about star power, it was about aligning with someone whose personal story gave the lyrics an even greater weight. Now, the stage was set. The history of the song, the personal connections of both artists, and the cultural significance all built toward one single, electrifying moment, the live performance itself. And when the first notes were played, the audience knew they were witnessing something that would be remembered for years. But before we break down that unforgettable performance in detail, we need to talk about the build-up. Because the way this duet came together, the rehearsals, the behind-the-scenes conversations, and the industry buzz leading up to it, tells us just as much about its impact as the performance itself. And what we uncovered about those moments might just surprise you. When news first broke that Kirk Franklin and Jennifer Hudson would be performing together, fans instantly knew it would be a moment worth watching. But what many didn't realize was just how carefully this collaboration was orchestrated. This wasn't a random pairing thrown together at the last minute for publicity. No, this duet had roots, planning, and intention. Kirk Franklin has always been strategic about the way he presents gospel music. His mission has never simply been about creating songs. It's been about creating experiences. Whether it's with full choirs, live band arrangements, or unexpected collaborations, Franklin understands the importance of blending tradition with innovation. So when the opportunity arose to pair with Jennifer Hudson, he saw it as more than just a performance. He saw it as a chance to bridge generations, styles, and audiences. Behind the scenes, rehearsals weren't just technical run-throughs. According to insiders close to the production, Franklin and Hudson spent hours discussing the heart of the song. They didn't just want to get the notes right, they wanted to capture the soul of it. Franklin, known for his intense energy and passion, reportedly emphasized to Hudson that Silver and Gold wasn't about showing off vocal fireworks. It was about delivering a message, and Hudson, with her deep emotional connection to gospel roots, agreed wholeheartedly. But here's where it gets interesting. While Franklin was eager to spotlight the classic message of silver and gold, producers and some members of the event's creative team reportedly wanted something more flashy. They suggested pairing the song with extra instrumental flourishes, or even medleys that would combine it with other gospel favorites. Franklin, however, stood firm. He believed the song could stand on its own, that its simplicity was its power. This quiet tug-of-war behind the scenes added another layer of tension leading up to the big night. On Jennifer Hudson's side, there was also pressure. As someone celebrated more in the secular music industry than in gospel circles, Hudson knew she would face scrutiny. Gospel fans can be protective of their sacred music, and any hint of over-singing or making the performance about personal glory rather than worship often sparks backlash. Hudson, however, approached the song with humility. Reports from those who were present at rehearsals described how she would often close her eyes, singing through the verses as if she were back in her childhood church pews in Chicago. She wasn't performing for the crowd, she was pouring out her soul. The anticipation was only heightened by whispers that the duet was being positioned as more than just a one-off. Some speculated that this was a test run to gauge whether Franklin and Hudson might collaborate on a larger project in the future, perhaps even a gospel-inspired album or special tour. While nothing was ever confirmed, the buzz surrounding this possibility added fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, fans were already taking to social media before the performance even happened. Tweets, Facebook posts, and gospel forums lit up with discussions. Some were excited. This is the duet we never knew we needed. Others were skeptical. Why Jennifer Hudson? Why not a gospel singer? and a few were downright critical, questioning whether Franklin was leaning too much on celebrity collaborations rather than sticking with his choir roots. By the time the night of the performance arrived, the atmosphere was electric. Franklin, always known for his charisma and unpredictability, promised that audiences would experience something unforgettable. Hudson, on the other hand, remained quieter, letting her voice and presence speak for themselves. The stage was set for something that could either be a triumph or a controversy, and that uncertainty only made people more eager to see what would happen. Here's the twist. The behind-the-scenes footage, which later surfaced online, showed just how much emotion was already in the room before the first note was even sung. In one clip, Franklin is seen pacing backstage, eyes closed, whispering words of prayer. Hudson, dressed simply but powerfully, stood nearby with her hands clasped, clearly centering herself for the moment. It wasn't about fame or cameras, it was about something deeper. And yet, despite the prayerful atmosphere, industry insiders knew that all eyes would be on how these two would balance their styles. Would Franklin's energetic directing and passionate delivery overpower Hudson's soaring vocals? Would Hudson's powerhouse voice overshadow the intimacy of the song's message? These were the questions on everyone's mind as the lights dimmed, the band began to play, and the first notes of Silver and Gold filled the air. The stage was dark at first, the audience hushed in anticipation. Then, a single spotlight illuminated the piano. A soft, soulful intro began to play, and from the shadows emerged Kirk Franklin. Unlike his usual energetic entrances where he rallies the crowd with shouts and hand claps, this time he was calm, almost reverent. His presence immediately set the tone. It wasn't going to be a show, it was going to be a moment. Franklin began by speaking softly to the audience, not singing yet, but laying the foundation. He reminded everyone that in a world obsessed with material things, wealth, fame, recognition, there's something infinitely greater. His words echoed the song's core message. I'd rather have Jesus than silver and gold. It was like a sermon before the song, drawing the crowd in not just musically, but spiritually. Then came Jennifer Hudson. The room erupted as she stepped forward, her presence commanding without a single note sung. Wearing a sleek but understated outfit, Hudson didn't need extravagance. The focus was entirely on her voice. As the band transitioned into the opening chords of Silver and Gold, Hudson closed her eyes, lifted her chin, and began to sing. Her first note cut through the room like lightning, clear, powerful, and drenched in emotion. The audience's reaction was immediate. Some gasped, some stood, and many raised their hands in reverence, as if they were in church. Hudson's voice carried not just technical brilliance, but deep conviction. You could hear the pain of her past, the strength of her survival, and the faith that carried her through. Each word, silver and gold, I'd rather have Jesus than silver and gold, landed like a testimony. Franklin joined in, not to outshine, but to build. He moved between directing the choir and harmonizing with Hudson, creating a dynamic push and pull. At times, he leaned into the mic with urgency, delivering spoken word-like ad-libs that added fire to the song. At other moments, he stepped back, letting Hudson's voice soar. Their chemistry was undeniable. It wasn't a competition, it was a conversation between two artists who respected the power of the message. And then came the peak. As the song built, Hudson unleashed her full vocal range, reaching high, sustained notes that shook the room. The choir behind her swelled. Franklin urged the band to lean in, and suddenly the stage felt alive with electricity. Some audience members were visibly in tears. Others shouted "Amen" and "Hallelujah" as if they had been transported to a Sunday service. But here's where the controversy begins. While many were moved to tears, some critics in the audience whispered that Hudson's delivery was too much, that it turned a humble song of worship into a Broadway-style showcase. Others felt Franklin's interjections and dramatic gestures turned the performance into more of a spectacle than a sacred offering. The divide was clear even as the audience stood to their feet in a thunderous ovation. On social media, reactions exploded within minutes. Clips of Hudson's high notes began trending almost instantly, with fans writing things like, "Jennifer Hudson just took us to church tonight," and "Kirk Franklin and Jennifer Hudson just gave us the duet of the year." But alongside the praise, there were also critics. One gospel blogger posted, "This isn't worship, it's entertainment dressed as gospel," while another wrote, "Hudson doesn't need to oversing to prove her point. Let the song breathe." Interestingly, one behind-the-scenes moment captured after the performance showed Hudson hugging Franklin tightly, both visibly emotional. Franklin could be heard saying, "That's what it's about. The message, the heart." It was a reminder that, for the performers themselves, this wasn't about applause or critique. It was about ministry through music. Still, the conversation didn't end when the lights dimmed. The duet became the subject of think pieces, reaction videos, and heated debates across platforms. Was this performance proof that gospel music can reach mainstream audiences without losing its soul? Or was it a sign that gospel is drifting too far into the realm of performance art, risking its sacred roots? One thing was certain: nobody could ignore it. Love it or question it, Franklin and Hudson had created something unforgettable, and the ripple effects of that night would continue long after the final note. The moment Kirk Franklin and Jennifer Hudson walked off that stage, the performance had already taken on a life of its own. Within minutes, clips began circulating online. Cell phone recordings flooded Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. By the time the official footage was uploaded, it was already one of the most shared gospel performances in recent years. But the conversation wasn't just about how powerful it was. People were debating every aspect of the duet, from the delivery to the symbolism behind it. On one side, there was overwhelming praise. Fans called it the collaboration of the decade, and proof that gospel music still has the power to move culture. Comment sections filled with testimonies from people who said they hadn't set foot in church for years, but this performance reminded them of the faith they grew up with. One viral tweet read, "Jennifer Hudson's voice plus Kirk Franklin's spirit equals chills for days." Others celebrated the way Franklin and Hudson bridged generational gaps, with younger fans discovering a gospel classic for the first time through Hudson's star power. But not everyone was celebrating. Traditional gospel audiences, especially those deeply rooted in church culture, expressed mixed feelings. Some accused Hudson of overshadowing the message of the song with her powerhouse vocals. Others criticized Franklin for relying too heavily on celebrity collaborations rather than spotlighting new gospel talent. In gospel forums, one commenter wrote, "This was more performance than worship. Where was the humility? Where was the reverence?" Another added, "It felt like a show for the audience, not an offering to God." And then came the think pieces. Blogs and entertainment sites began publishing articles dissecting the duet. Some hailed it as a bold reintroduction of gospel to mainstream culture, arguing that Hudson's involvement made the genre accessible to audiences who might never otherwise listen. Others warned that gospel was at risk of becoming watered down by industry spectacle, losing the raw authenticity that made it so powerful in the first place. The media picked up on another angle too, the symbolism of the collaboration. Kirk Franklin, a pioneer of gospel's crossover into pop culture, standing beside Jennifer Hudson, a secular superstar who never abandoned her gospel roots, created a narrative of unity. To many, it represented the blurred lines between sacred and secular music, proof that spirituality doesn't have to be confined to church walls. For critics, however, this very blending was dangerous. It sparked conversations about whether gospel music should remain distinct and pure, or whether it should evolve and adapt to reach new audiences. Social media only amplified the divide. On YouTube, reaction videos poured in. Some influencers cried on camera, visibly moved as they replayed Hudson's soaring notes. Others critiqued the performance, saying it was too polished and too Hollywood for a song that was meant to be stripped down and intimate. Hashtags like hashtag silver and gold, hashtag Jennifer Hudson, and hashtag Kirk Franklin began trending, pulling in viewers far beyond the gospel community. Even celebrities weighed in. A few well-known gospel artists congratulated Franklin and Hudson publicly, praising the duet as an example of excellence. Meanwhile, others were more cautious, noting that while the performance was technically brilliant, gospel is about more than talent. It's about ministry. These mixed responses only fueled speculation about whether Franklin and Hudson might work together again. Behind the scenes, insiders reported that Franklin was unfazed by the criticism. He has always been a disruptor in gospel, and for him, controversy was nothing new. In fact, some suggested he welcomed it. For Franklin, the purpose was never to please everyone. It was to spark conversation, reach hearts, and push boundaries. Hudson, on the other hand, was reportedly moved by both the praise and the critiques. Sources close to her shared that she took the feedback seriously, reflecting on how she could balance her natural show-stopping power with the humility gospel audiences expect. The duet also had a ripple effect on music platforms. Streams of silver and gold spiked, with a whole new generation discovering Kirk Franklin's original version. Hudson's fans, many of whom had never dived into gospel music before, began exploring Franklin's catalog. Meanwhile, gospel playlists saw a surge in listens, proving that the performance didn't just stir emotions, it reignited interest in the genre itself. And here's where the aftermath takes an even more intriguing turn. Rumors began circulating that this duet was only the beginning, that Franklin and Hudson were exploring the possibility of future collaborations. Some insiders whispered about a joint gospel project, while others speculated about a live tour that could bring gospel to arenas usually reserved for pop and R&B acts. Whether true or not, these whispers kept fans buzzing, eager to see if this one night was the start of a larger movement. But perhaps the most important impact wasn't on the industry or the critics. It was on the everyday people who watched. Testimonies poured into comment sections from viewers who said the performance gave them hope during hard times. Others said they felt reconnected to their faith or that they saw themselves reflected in Hudson's journey of pain and perseverance. Whatever critics had to say, one thing was undeniable. This duet touched lives.